Welcome to the So Much More podcast, where we talk with people in the custom window treatment, soft home furnishings industry, and so much more. I'm your host, Ciel DeGuglielmo. My guest on the podcast today is Ella Hall. She is the founder of Stitch Room, which is a Brooklyn-based upholstery shop that specializes in creating custom pillows, cushions, curtains, and upholstery products. With a degree in fashion design from Parsons and a background in interior design, Ella quickly recognized the pain points that designers often faced in the traditional upholstery industry. Driven by her entrepreneurial spirit, she saw an opportunity to revolutionize a field that had remained stagnant for decades. Her approach has been to infuse technology into the upholstery process. She developed a custom platform that makes ordering and tracking easier for interior designers and the trade than ever before. This platform enables a seamless experience for designers and customers alike. Ella's innovative approach has not only modernized Stitch Room, but has also set a new standard for the upholstery industry, making her a true pioneer in blending craftsmanship with cutting-edge technology. And that has been so fascinating in talking with her. I really can't wait for you to hear our interview today, how she's using technology and ideas she has for how to use it in the future. I really hope you enjoy this interview with Ella today. Ella, thank you so much for joining me today and being on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, me too. I'm so excited to be here to chat.
I'm excited for you to share your story. I'm going to let you tell everyone a little bit about yourself, but I had the pleasure of being on a National Upholstery Association webinar that you did, and I just love seeing your workspace and hearing a little bit about your story. So we'll start with, who are you? Where in the world are you? And tell us a little bit about your life and your business.
Yes, so my name's Ella. I am currently in Brooklyn, New York. I've lived here since 2009, and prior to that, I was in Wisconsin, where I grew up.
Okay.
And I'm the oldest of four girls. We're really close in age, so I was always the leader of the pack. I was always the one carving, the way, but we were all very, very different. And at a very young age, I was very inspired by using my hands and just being creative. And my next door neighbor, she actually had a couple of sewing machines in her basement, and I would go over there to play, and I would come home and say, Mom, she has all these really cool tools and machines. I really want to see what this is about. And my parents were not creatives. They came from an accounting background. My dad was a professional athlete. So for them, a sewing machine was the furthest thing that they could imagine that I would be interested in. But for some reason, it just sparked this huge interest in me. And I said, Mom, I really want to take sewing lessons. Can you ask her if she'll teach me? And she said, sure, I'd love to. So I started taking sewing lessons. The first thing I ever sewed was a pair of pajama pants.
Okay.
I think I was 8 years old. And from that moment on, I was just like, this is such a cool medium. I can take something that's flat. I can turn it into something that's wearable. I can customize it. I have full control over all the dimensions. And it was so amazing. So that was my entry into the sewing world.
Okay.
But yeah, that's where I'm from. And that's how I was inspired to set this as my career path.
Okay. So I want to talk about how you got started with it as a business, but I'm curious, do any of your sisters sew or do anything creative?
No. And I think they are genuinely creative. Creativity, there's so many different versions of what creativity means and what it is. But I think in a traditional sense of what you think of creative, using your hands and art and all of those things, none of them are in that path or that world.
Okay.
But I think it's really great. We all support each other. They're my best friends. Mm-hmm. They've come and taken a pillow class so they can appreciate what that's like.
So fun.
Yes. So one of my sisters is actually living in Brooklyn. And so when I was starting to teach some classes, I had her trial and I said, can you give me feedback? I want to teach people who never have had experience in this world. And so she came and she's like, I have such an appreciation for this now. I didn't realize how many steps there were.
Yeah,
so
that's so nice.
That was refreshing and nice.
I'm always curious about that because we joke around a lot. I'm one of 9, but I have 3 sisters, and
Okay.
I'm the only one who does anything like this. But as you said, creativity comes in a lot of different forms. So one of my sisters is she has her doctorate in pharmacology, but she runs her husband's dental office, and she is so brilliant when it comes to floral arrangements. And I've seen that in the past couple of years where that's really where her creativity comes out. And I see it in my other 2 sisters as well, but just not in the same way it's come forward in me. So that's fascinating to me. And I love
I know.
that
I
you
love it.
appreciated what you're able to do without really giving it a whole lot of thought anymore, I
Yes.
should say.
Yes.
All right. So
Exactly.
how did you get started with this as a business? What has your career path been like?
So I moved to New York to go to college. So in 2009, I was 18. I was navigating the world. I've always been really excited by big cities. And because I had this background in sewing, fashion design seemed like the most likely career path for me. So I went to Parsons and I was studying fashion design. And then when I graduated, I didn't really know what I wanted to do from there. I think I learned in school that I loved making things, but I wasn't necessarily in love with the fashion industry. It was just the medium that I had.
Okay.
So I started shopping around and I knew that I wanted to start my own business, but I've never been the person to just want to start something because I wanted to start it.
Okay.
There had to be a purpose and a need and a vision. And I didn't really have that. So what I thought was, well, how can I gain tools in my toolbox so that when the time comes and I'm inspired to start a business, that I have what I need, a foundation to be able to start a business.
Okay.
And I was an assistant at a startup. It was a woman and she was starting a fashion design company and she just needed someone who could help her with everything. And so I came on, I worked for her for 2 years. I did everything from like running around Midtown and seeing factories and picking out swatches and doing sketches to doing her QuickBooks. Okay. So it was everything in between. And I got to see how a business operated from day one because I was really there from day one.
Yeah.
So fortunately, I got paid to make mistakes under her belt or see her mistakes. So I was able to learn a lot through that process. But I also learned I don't want to start a fashion design company. I don't really know where I want to be within this creative world, but I'm ready to move on. And so in that time, I started shopping around for jobs. Again, I was still really young and stupid and had no idea what I was doing. But I found this interior design startup that was merging, one of the first to merge technology with interior design. And I knew I wanted to be at the technological forefront of companies. I knew that that was the future. This is when a lot of tech startups were just being born. And I knew I wanted to be involved and I knew I wanted to be in something creative. So this felt like a really good fit.
Okay.
I wasn't doing anything creative, really. I mean, in the traditional sense that we think about when we think of creativity, there were creative aspects to the job, but I was essentially client services manager. And so I was solving people's problems, which there has to be creativity in problem solving and challenges, but I wasn't using my hands, which is what I wanted to be doing. But what I learned was there are so many challenges in getting anything custom made. So whether it's custom tile, custom wallpaper, custom drapery, all of those different things, I was the person who was dealing with all the problems because I had about 50 interior designers that I was managing their clients for them. And usually, as we all know, people only come to you when there's a problem. They're not calling me up telling me how great their experience was. They're calling me to say, hey, the drapery was made too short, or the direction of the pattern was incorrect, or I just kept hearing all of these things. And I'm like, I'm not hearing any issues with quality. I'm really hearing issues about communication. There was a communication drop off, or a measurement wasn't communicated clearly, or something went wrong within the communication. That was the real issue. And so that was my spark. That was the moment where I was like, okay, I think I could be the person to help solve this sort of communication problem? Because that's really what I'm identifying as the issue here. Mm-hmm. And so because I had these interior designers at hand, I said, hey, let me start sewing your pillows for you. I had a sewing machine at home. I had them bring their fabric into the office. I said, what is your upholsterer charging? I'll charge half. I'll do it in half the time, half the price, and I'll bring it back in a couple days. So a couple designers started bringing me their fabrics. I would sew it, and then I would bring it back. I would text them, and I'd be like, here you go. So this is my little side hustle, especially like living in New York as an early 20-something. You just need extra cash anywhere you can find it. Yeah. And so this was my moment. And I didn't really think of it as a business. It was definitely a side hustle. But that was the moment that I knew that there was something. Mm-hmm. So that was the beginning. Then I realized I started making more money sewing pillows on the side than I was in this client services role.
Okay.
And it was just word of mouth. I didn't have a website. I didn't have an Instagram. I had nothing. It was just the designers that I was dealing with on a daily basis. And I took a moment and I said, okay, if consistently for 3 months, I can make enough money to pay my rent and afford groceries, then I'm going to leave the job. And then I did.
Wow.
And so I didn't have any savings. I had nothing. I was also, again, very young, very stupid, believed that I knew everything, and I was a huge risk taker. Okay. And so I tell a lot of people, this is kind of a side note, but a lot of people ask me, like, how did you jump into doing this? Like, how did you have the courage to start this? And I said, well, I wasn't really leaving anything special. Like, I was barely making any money. Yeah. I didn't have any benefits. I was still on my parents' health insurance. I had multiple roommates, so I was paying very little in rent. Like, there was not really anything that I was leaving.
It wasn't that was so great as it appears to be.
Exactly. As it is, as it would be now. I think in my, 30s and the older years compared to my early 20s where I had, nothing. Now I have kids, I have a husband, I have people that I have to take care of. And so it's more daunting. Whereas before it was like, okay, if this doesn't work out, it's not that big of a deal. I'll go find a job.
Right.
But a lot of people now who have jobs that have a 401k or they have a really great salary or they have a lot of security and benefits, it's so much harder to leave an opportunity like that to go start your own thing because you almost have to take a step backwards. Mm-hmm. But I never had to take the step backwards. I was already at the bottom anyway. So I really had nothing to lose. And so fortunately, that helped me to be able to start this. Whereas now, if you were to ask me, hey, would you start a business? I'm like, I don't know. Like, it's a lot. It's a lot,
And we'll talk a little bit about the size of your business and how it's grown in a minute. But the idea of having other people rely on you for their income does change the risks you're willing to make because it's not just for you anymore.
Right.
And as you said, you're married, you have children. It's a risk for them as well if you make certain choices. All right. So you're making pillows in an apartment that you're sharing with other people. Are you doing this in the room that you have for yourself, or are you sharing space with other people and sewing? How's that happening?
So I was living with my now husband, but who was my boyfriend at the time. And so we were sharing one room, and then we had an additional roommate. And the living room is where I had my sewing machine, and I was doing all the cutting on the dining room table.
Okay.
And all the fabric was everywhere. It was a lot, but I always knew what time they were going to come home from work. So I always threw everything in a closet really quickly before I knew that they were going to arrive home. I remember a couple of moments where our roommate came in and he stepped on a pin or something. And I'm like, oh God, this is not going to go well. But that was the beginning. And at first I only had a home sewing machine. Like, I just had whatever I was using for side projects at home because I had access to all the machinery when I was in school. So I didn't need that prior to that time period. But I knew that my first investment had to be in an industrial sewing machine because I needed that quality. And so one of the funny stories that I tell that feels so vivid even to this day was, again, I had no money. My boyfriend / husband now was like, you need a nicer sewing machine. Like, you are cranking out a ton of pillows. Let me buy you one. And all I ask for in return is that you make enough money to cover the cost of what the machine costed. You don't have to pay me back.
Mm-hmm.
I just want you to like succeed in this business. So I was really excited. I went on Craigslist. I found an old sewing machine, and it was just the standard straight stitch industrial machine. And I went to go check it out. It was in the West Village, and it was $300. And I didn't realize, because I was so excited, I was walking up so many flights of stairs to go test it out.
Yes.
And I go up there and I test it and everything's perfect. And I come back home and I tell him, like, I found the perfect machine. Let's go pick it up this weekend. And he's like, great, I'll help you. So we get over there. After the third or fourth flight of stairs, he's like, do you realize this is a 5th floor walk up? Like, there's no elevator. This is a 250-pound machine. How are you going to get it down? And I said, we're just going to figure it out.
That's one of the advantages of being young and stupid. We don't worry about those things. We just figure it out. I love that. And I'm not calling you stupid. You said that. I do the same things. Like, I get there and I go, oh, how am I doing this?
Yeah, I do. Even to this day, I do a lot of doing before I think, which is a blessing and a curse.
Mm-hmm.
But back then, there was a lot more of that going on. And we just had like sheer willpower and excitement getting us through. And I think he still has a scar on his leg to prove that this happened from years ago. We eventually got it home. It took hours. It was the hottest day of the summer. It was terrible.
Of course it was.
And then I realized, oh, I probably need a mechanic to like fix everything that happened while we were taking it down the janky stairs, because I couldn't even sew anything when I got home. So it was a mess. But even to this day, that machine is still in our workroom.
Oh, that's awesome. And you're still with your husband. So
I'm still with my husband. Okay. And we have two kids, and we have a third on the way. So
oh my goodness.
There's a lot
Congratulations.
Happening. Thank you. I know.
So in spite of all that, he stayed.
He stayed. I think he was inspired by my enthusiasm and just my excitement for it. And we're very, very different people, but we completely balance each other out. So it works really well. It's like a really nice combo.
And I love that he supported you, not just in the endeavor, but wanted you to be profitable at it. Not just, here's this cute little thing you're doing. You can do this and I'll help you, but you've got to continue to be profitable in it or it's not worth your time. I love that that was the mindset coming from him.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And $300 back then felt like so much. I was like, I think I can do it.
Yeah, exactly.
I was like, I wonder how long it'll take me to, pay off essentially this piece of machinery. And then, fast forward a couple of years, it's funny now, but
yes,
that was the mindset at the time.
All right. So how did it progress from dragging this monster up to your apartment and going from there? What happened next?
So very quickly, I realized I have something. I'm getting more and more designers, and it was all interior designers that I was working with. And they're the best type of business because I had personal relationships with a lot of these designers to start with, but also it's recurring business.
Yes.
So once they have another job, then they come right to me. Right. And I didn't have to constantly be finding new clients. And then they had friends. So they would just tell their other designer friends. And it was just a great referral way to get business. So I realized that was the market. And what I quickly learned was if I'm going to change this process of getting the orders in and the communication, I really need to hone in on that part. So I started tracking everything. I started tracking how much time I was spending communicating with the designers versus sewing. How many emails on average did it take to get the actual order placed? How much time was spent per designer for each type of project? So whether it was a commercial job or a residential job, whether it was a pillow or a cushion. And again, back then, I was only doing the things that I knew how to personally make.
Right.
And so because I was coming from fashion, I could do things like basic drapery, pillows, cushions, and I would just learn through experiencing and watching YouTube videos and talking to other people and trial and error and all of that. But I wasn't doing anything really related to upholstery just because I didn't have the skill set, and I wasn't really testing or pushing myself to go into that. I didn't have the space. I had, it was limiting. So I was really focusing on simple sewn products, mostly pillows and cushions. That was the business at the time. So once I realized that I was spending a lot more time communicating with people versus sewing. So in the beginning, it was maybe 50% of my time sewing, 50% of my time emailing and on the phone and communicating. I knew that I had to figure out that communication side because I had to become more efficient.
Right.
And I knew that's what the business like was needing and that's what it needed to be. So I had a friend who was a web developer in Silicon Valley, like on the West Coast, and he had worked at a couple of startups. And I reached out to him. I was happening to be in LA and he was there and we were getting a drink. And I said, hey, I have this idea. Like I've started this side hustle business. It didn't even have a name. It was just paying my rent. I was just kind of navigating what this was looking like. I was identifying pain points and I was just getting a lay of the land. And I said, I need help building a website because I don't have a website. I don't have anything. And can you help me build a website? And I said, I don't have any money. I can't pay you, but can you help me in any way? I'll like pay you back somehow. And he said, this is perfect timing. I'm actually leaving my job and, you know, I have enough runway to be able to survive for a little while. I can help other friends with things and like, I'll help you out. So we put our heads together. We started building this website. I was explaining the whole process of production, how things are made, how you have to quote yardage, but sometimes that changes depending on patterns. And I gave him like a whole education based off of pillows and cushions, essentially, of how you make them and the production process and what changes happen and how sometimes the site visit changes the measurements and they have to be updated. Right. And you have to ensure that the designer knows that they were updated and that you have the proper notes with the timestamp on them. Like I had all of this process written down fully of exactly what I envisioned to be the solution. And so we just cranked, like we would work together hours and hours and hours, and he can custom build any sort of website, which traditionally is extremely expensive, but because he was my friend, he was doing it for free. And quickly he realized how much passion I had for this, how excited I was about it, and how there was a market for this. So a couple months in, he said, can I be your co-founder? Like, I want to do this business with you. Like, I want to take it to the next level. I also think he thought, which I also agree with, he had a completely different perspective. Like, he wasn't jaded by this industry. He actually had no idea anything about sewing, anything about manufacturing. And that's also very inspiring. It's like seeing someone from a different place come in and look at the world a little bit differently, which he can ask all these really interesting questions because he's like, have you thought about this? And I'm like, no, because this is just the way you do it.
Right.
And that's like what I was conditioned to do. So he started asking so many questions that I would have just never thought of. And also I was still very young in this industry, so I didn't know a lot either, but it was so great to have him because he was thinking about things so much differently than I was.
Yeah.
So he had the tech side, I had the interior designer sewing side, and us together it was unstoppable. It was great. It was like, we were so excited. We just wanted to make this thing work. So a couple years later, this is now 2018, we officially launched our app. And that was the first version of this ordering system that we created. And it was built mostly for pillows and cushions. So you can type in the dimensions of whatever you're going to order. It automates a price for you. We figured out pricing based off of a square inch, essentially. And that pricing has been updated over the years after we figured out like cost of foam. And it's very easy to update depending on the market and how things are changing. And it allowed us to be really lean and efficient. So it took that, 50% of my day that I was spending emailing people down to 10%.
Okay.
And every time the client needed to give me information about updating their order, they could do it themselves. So they could go in, they could update the size, or they could send me a message. And it wasn't all just in an email. It was all in this, it was connected to the specific project that we were discussing, and everything was stored based on the project.
And there's also less room for error because you're not listening to them on the phone or reading an email and maybe transposing two numbers or just doing something incorrectly. They're the ones putting the information in.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay.
So that was great. And then what we learned also, and this is kind of like a step backwards for the business, because we were dealing with interior designers who were older than us. And so people were scared of technology.
Yes.
So some people didn't feel comfortable putting in their own information. So we had to find an easy way that we could also input for them if we needed to, but then they would also have sign off before it actually went into production. Because in a perfect world, Tom, my co-founder, he comes from this tech background where you have to enable others to do what they need to do so that you don't have to do the work for them because it saves you time. But we also live in a world where we can't just force people to adapt to technology if they don't want to and if they don't feel comfortable.
Right.
And so I was always advocating for the designers and saying, like, they're not going to pay. Okay, maybe for a pillow, under $100, they'll pay for that without talking to a human.
Right.
But as we started growing, if you're placing a larger order, you're not going to just swipe your credit card from a random website for $5,000 without talking to someone.
Right.
So we went from a really tech heavy user does everything sort of approach to a more collaborative approach where we have a face behind the website. Okay. There are people, you are going to be assigned one specific person who's going to be in charge of your project. And as we've grown, we've heavily invested in client services. And that's like the number one differentiator where we are tech enabled and that's what's making us extremely efficient. But we have invested in people to make sure that they are hand holding so that the designers and their clients feel comfortable.
Okay. That is fascinating. And I realized you were doing some of that from attending that webinar with the National Upholstery Association. I didn't realize that you and your partner had come up with a lot of the background for it. And Ella, I think the other really important thing to take note of is the fact that you recognize problems and you work to solve them. And especially older interior designers who were drawing their own things for their clients. And everything was non-technical. You were picking up samples at the showroom and like nothing was being transferred electronically. Everything was hands-on and in front of the client. So for you to be able to analyze that and kind of back it up a little bit and say, okay, we can depend on the technology to keep us lean and accurate. We still need someone to handhold the client. Okay, yes. That's fascinating.
Yes. So we've invested in that a lot over time. And now our goal is to make those client services team members, them as efficient as possible with the technology. So they can spend their time on the phone helping the client to feel comfortable about ordering something that is custom because that's scary.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So you've got this website up and going, you're getting more business. Where are you now making everything? Because I'm thinking this apartment is not enough.
Okay, the apartment wasn't big enough. So in 2018, like when we launched this website is when things started to really grow. And we got an office space. I was still scared that I couldn't like sign a lease and I wasn't for sure if I was going to be able to pay the rent every single month. So it was a month to month. It wasn't that much larger than what my living room was. It was just enough to kind of get out of there. And we were just cranking stuff out really, really quickly so that every time something was completed, we were delivering it almost the same day so that we didn't have to hold anything.
Okay.
And we were moving spaces every year for the first 4 years because again, New York is so expensive. The price per square foot is so expensive that we couldn't gain 500 square feet. We could only gain like 200 square feet every time we were growing because it was adding thousands of dollars to our rent. And we just couldn't grow that quickly. We didn't have enough money to be able to invest in future growth. We had to do, what can we do right now?
Okay.
So eventually we got a large enough space that we could stay for a little while. And that was in 2020, which also was a hard year.
Yeah.
So we had just moved. I had just found out I was pregnant with my first kid. And then the pandemic hit.
Wow. How much fun was that?
I know. And again, we're dealing with a lot of commercial projects at the time. And so that was really hard because everything stopped. Yeah. At least in the beginning, everything went on pause. And as we find out, which we didn't know later down the road, a couple of months later, things started picking up like crazy because everyone was spending time in their homes, but we didn't know that at the time. And so another thing we had to do very quickly was pivot and be like, how are we going to survive? And at this time, I think we had 4 employees. So this is 2020. We had 4 or 5 employees and some of those people were sewing, some were admin. And we were just trying to figure out what to do. So that's when we started making masks, and we pivoted really quick, and we, went into the mask market only for a couple of months and then quickly moved back into home goods. But it was also in that year that we started doing upholstery. Okay. Because up until that point, it was just pillows and cushions. And these designers started saying, like, we love your service and we love your communication and we love the way that Stitch Room operates, but you guys need to offer more things, because if we can only get our pillows and cushions from you, then we have to go to another vendor to go get the upholstery, and we want to do everything in one. So I said, okay, I got to start hiring people that know how to do this stuff. So that's when I first started hiring upholsterers, and it was on a contract basis. Like, if we had a job, I would have them come in and work on the piece. But that was the moment that things really started growing quickly, because once we started offering more products and more options, then those designers, the order values started increasing like crazy. Okay. So at first, when it was just they were ordering a couple pillows and a cushion from us, then it went from pillows, cushions, a headboard, a reupholstery job, all of those things in one. So then our business doubled like overnight because we started offering those things. And we didn't really grow our client base. We just grew the offering. So as soon as that offering opened up, that's what doubled it. We didn't have to do very much work. That was just hard to manage, though, because we didn't know how to double our business overnight and then handle that inbound. So that is where we had to get really organized. Mm-hmm. And that was the beginning of using something, not ClickUp exactly at the time, but a system that allowed us to track the orders and all the details of the projects even better. Because when we first built the company, it was just based off of pillows and cushions. And I wasn't thinking huge. I wasn't thinking big at the time. I was thinking, like, what can I handle? Right. But the system had to be able to, like, 10x, and we weren't building for that at the time. So we had to adapt the technology to be able to handle a bigger growth. Mm-hmm. And all that was happening at the same time. Right. It was kind of chaotic, but now looking back, it was fun. Now that I think about it.
And you also had built the trust with those designers. So once they realized that you had things to offer that they were interested in, it had to be a no-brainer for them. Because as we know, in the past, however many years, it's been harder and harder to find craftspeople and upholsterers in particular who can do big projects, since a lot of people are working out of their homes. They don't have the space for custom sofas or reupholstering large items. So that's unbelievable that you were able to tap into that market and do so well with it.
Yeah, we had to get creative too. Like, now that you're mentioning the bigger items and space and the cost of space, especially in New York, one of the coolest things I think that we built, which is in the website, is a tracker that gives the client the lead time. So let's say you're doing a sofa. It gives them, an 8 to 10 week lead time, but we say we're only going to take your sofa for a week when we need it. Right. And so the system tells us when we need to schedule a pickup based off of our production calendar, so that one, the client isn't left sofa-less for a very long time. And two, it's not just sitting, taking up space. Right. So these are small little things that helped us. It's a very creative way of, like, designing project management software, but it's been really helpful for us because we don't have to have tons and tons of space holding 10 sofas at a time. Right. We can have 10 sofa jobs, but we're just waiting. They're just sitting at the client's house right until the moment that we're going to work on them.
Okay. That's brilliant, because that space is one of the biggest problems that many of the upholsterers in the industry have. And yes, they talk about people stopping by and dropping off things, and, like, you just don't have the room for it. I know. I have a really wonderful upholsterer who's not too far from me. And every time I go into her shop, I am immediately claustrophobic because she doesn't have a lot of space. And there's always one or two things there, either waiting to be picked up or waiting for her to start. And it just, and she does operate very close to the time, but I walk in there, I go, yeah, I couldn't do this. I could not work under these circumstances. So I know. Did you learn upholstery yourself, or did you hire upholsterers?
I hired upholsterers, but I learned it over the years. Okay. So I'm really interested in it. I love it. And so I started, like, taking apart my own chairs, and I it was all around me. So I was able to pick up so many things.
Okay.
So I don't do it now, but I can if I want to. I just don't have that much time. I wish I could do more of it, but I have an inside look into it. So I'm more on the cut and sew side.
Okay. Okay. So how many people do you have working for you right now?
I think it's about 21.
Okay. And so you have admin people running the business, and you have people creating and doing the fabrication.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. As you were just saying, you don't get to do as much of this as you used to. I think that's where, years ago when people were starting businesses, it'd be like, well, don't do something that you really love doing because you'll have to stop doing it when it's your business. If the business is big enough, yes, you do have to stop doing it because you have to either sub work out or hire people or whatever. So I'm curious about, for you, what have been some of the biggest challenges besides space in New York City have there been for growing this business? What have been some of your big challenges?
I think the hardest part and the biggest challenge for me is the people stuff, because I started this company so young. I was thinking about the market and I was thinking about the products that we were making and how to make them, but I didn't think a lot about the people that I would hire and managing them.
Okay.
And I think that is I'm like a very emotional person when it comes to like wanting others to be happy and to succeed. Mm-hmm. And I think that's such a positive and a driving force to why I've created such a great work environment. But I also didn't have any managerial experience going into this. It's really like I'm an older sister. That's it,
Yeah.
I didn't have that work experience going into it. So I've had to learn on the job. And that has definitely been the biggest challenge, because now that I'm putting food essentially on 20-something people's table, that is so much pressure because I care so much. Like, they are the number one thing, which is such a good driving force to help make decisions. But that's the biggest challenge. You're not dealing with robots. You're dealing with like robust people who have their own problems and their own issues and their own ways of doing things. Yeah. And you have to make all of those things work well. And you have to be fair to everyone. And that has been the biggest learning curve, I think, for me. But I also find the most reward in it, because once I've found this inertia that has allowed these people to work together and to empower them, and I've found my groove around that, that's the coolest part about it.
Okay.
So that has been the biggest challenge, but also the biggest reward.
Okay.
And it's not even about, the numbers or how big we've become. That's the exciting part. Like, the exciting part is seeing others work together to grow, to find common grounds, and just to make this thing work together.
All right. So I'm curious, because you did talk about work environment during the webinar, and when we are creating custom products for our clients, quality is of the utmost importance, And you've done a really good job of working on solving the problem before it starts with the communication part of it. But now you have all these people who are making the things for you to get paid and run this business. So what happens when someone makes a mistake?
So that's hard, because we don't want to blame anyone. We really create an environment where everyone just comes together and it's a problem solving moment.
Okay.
And we make mistakes all the time. Like, it just happens. It's custom. No matter what it is, you have to think outside of the box when you're solving these problems. But I think we've done such a good job. Maybe in the last year or so, it's transformed, because prior to that, we didn't have the right team in place yet. And now that we have the right team in place, we have the proper support. So before, when we made a mistake, it was so detrimental, because either we were like right on time with the deadline, there wasn't a lot of wiggle room in any area, and people were kind of overworked. We, didn't have a lot of money. There was just a lot going on. And so those stressors made the problems that came up a lot harder to solve, because there was a lot of stress involved with them. But because we've solved these other issues where We're always ahead of schedule now. Like, we've been able to really get to that place. We have the right staffing in place.
Mm-hmm.
We have the experts in place that when we do make a mistake, it doesn't feel as heavy.
Okay.
And really what we do, and I think this is my favorite part about where we've gotten to as a company, whenever there's a mistake that's made, the 4 admin people that first know about it, because you're usually hearing about it from the client and they go directly to the client services, we sit down at the table. We have a morning meeting every day. And so we bring up anything that comes up from the day before. And we say, okay, here's the problem. Let's identify where the problem happened so that we can jot it down.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a record of every single mistake that we've ever made with different tags that are connected to the type of problem. So was this an internal problem? And how many times have we made this mistake before?
Right.
Because if it's the same mistake over and over and over, that can be frustrating and upsetting.
Yeah.
But if it's a new mistake, usually we just learn from it and move on.
Right.
So we identify, like, where was the mistake? How did it happen? Not who made it, but just what happened.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. We take a very unemotional approach to it. So it's just very straightforward. Like, this is what it was. And we come up with a solution together and we solve it and then we move forward.
Okay.
And so whoever was involved in that mistake is communicated with based off of, here's what we experienced. Not that it was a mistake. We don't even call it really a mistake. We're like, here's what we experienced. Here's how we solve it. And here's how we prevent it. And once we have those, we move forward.
Okay.
And that approach has been so much better, because once you start getting emotional about it, like, oh, that sucked, or like, I wish that didn't happen, or I'm so mad. Like, anytime those sorts of emotions come into it, it's so much harder to solve. But when you have people come together, and we also don't blame anyone, and now we've created an environment where we say, hey, I made a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Can you guys help me? Can you help me as a team solve it? And when someone admits that they made the mistake and they're asking for help, everyone else comes to their savior.
Yes.
But the second someone's like, it wasn't me, it wasn't my fault, that is the environment that you don't want to be in, because then people don't want to be around that.
Right.
And so we've really cultivated it. And I think it starts at the top. Like, it starts with me admitting when I make mistakes, which I do all the time. And because we're human, and that is just natural. And so by me starting that and like, I'm the leader. So if I can come and tell you, I made this mistake, I need help. Can you guys help me figure out how to solve this? Here's what I've identified as the issue, and this is how we're going to move forward. It allows others to feel okay doing the same.
Okay. All right. I feel like that's so important, because for those of us who work by ourselves, we are not nearly that kind to ourselves when we make a mistake, and we don't not take the emotion out of it. We throw the emotion all over it. And just listening to you talk about that, and a lot of my guests will say, when I make a mistake, I try to learn from it, try to make sure it doesn't happen again. But without the deliberate communication about it, without the deliberate documentation of it, it's a wasted lesson. And you're using the opportunity and also making it really comfortable for people to come forward and say, okay, hold the presses, here's a mistake. I also think it's interesting that you've really honed in on the practicality and the processes and procedures, so that you are running ahead. There is probably nothing worse than miscutting fabric and then realizing there's a 3-week lead time for the fabric to come back. And that's, I can't breathe even thinking about it. So if you're running ahead, then that gives you, and you're more financially solvent than you were in the beginning. So it's not as devastating when there's a mistake that happens. And I think so many of us operate so close to the line, especially in the beginning of our businesses. How can we not? But to have that room to breathe, or the room to get other ideas on how to solve the problem, I think that's brilliant.
Well, thank you.
I want to jump in and take a moment to thank the sponsors who make it possible for me to bring you the podcast each week. My sponsors are people in the industry that I have personally had a connection to, purchased from, or used their services. So it makes it really easy for me to tell you about them and the great things that they have to offer. Because I feel so strongly about education in our industry, I'm thrilled that as the owner of the Curtains and Soft Furnishings Resource Library, I can use the resources of the library to help support the podcast. The library hosts the industry's largest curated collection of educational resources for the custom home furnishings professional. Membership to the library gives you access to a wealth of downloadable reference materials, videos, live events, as well as a community of support to help you develop your design, sales, and fabrication skills, and to grow or start a business. Join the library today at csfrl.org. Angels Linings would like to invite you to become part of their family. With reputable lining comes exceptional customer service. Trust them with your linings like I do. You get 2 Tootsie Pops with every bolt of lining you receive. For smiles, satisfaction, and a sugar kick all around, call Angels Linings at 1-800-450-9368. The Workroom Channel is the premier online training provider for professional fabrication skills. Go to theworkroomchannel.com to browse the selection of anytime access courses created by industry experts. Watch detailed demonstration videos, download companion materials, and participate in private course discussion boards with your instructor and classmates from around the world. Start your course path today at theworkroomchannel.com. If you've listened to the podcast, you know how much I've learned from Michelle Williams. And I think most of my guests have mentioned taking at least one of her classes or gotten coaching from her. Her business is Scarlet Thread Consulting. Michelle loves to work with creative business owners to help them understand all aspects of their business and to use their gifts and talents to make it profitable. Michelle is a strategic profitability coach certified in the Profit First methodology, and she can be reached at scarletthreadconsulting.com. I've also mentioned my membership with the WCAA, and I'm now a gold level sponsor, where education, networking, visibility, and industry discounts are just a few of the benefits that are offered to our members. The Window Covering Association of America is the only national nonprofit trade association that's dedicated to the window coverings industry and the dealers, decorators, workrooms, designers, and installers that make up our membership. Join today at WCAA.org. WCAA, where you are never in business alone. I've also been extremely fortunate to be able to work with Merrill Y. Landis Ltd. It's a family-owned and operated custom workroom and product distribution company to the trade with over 70 years of experience. And in addition to their custom work, they offer a wide variety of decorative drapery hardware. They offer Stout and Flair 21 fabrics. They have Roman shade operating systems and assembly kits. They have motorization and workroom supplies, and they serve both designers and workrooms. And you can check out the MYL Advantage at myltd.com. I am curious about how you define success.
So for me, I would say success is more of a feeling.
Okay.
It's walking into a space where there's a buzzing workroom and everyone's energy is feeling really positive. I even define success as what we were just talking about, approaching a table where there's a big problem that we're trying to solve and coming out of it feeling so invigorated, even though we messed up.
Yes.
And so that to me is success, because you're never going to be able to change the mistakes. Like no matter what size you are, right, there's always going to be mistakes. There's always going to be challenges. And it's about how you're handling them. That is truly the definition of success, is when you can walk away and say, I feel good.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And there wasn't always moments like that. I think also when I come home at the end of the day and I sit down at the dinner table with my husband and my like crazy toddlers that are like running around, and I'm tired, but I'm like, that was fun. Like that was a good day.
Yeah.
And just being around such amazing people. I love going to work. And it wasn't always like that. Like there were very hard years and moments where it just didn't feel like that. And so now that it does, I'm like, that's success. So it doesn't really matter what the size was. And I think when I first started the company, I was like, a success, what I thought was success back then when I was just by myself in the living room, was like okay, when the business can make $1 million, like that is success, right? It was like something so arbitrary, so weird that I just threw out there. And I got to that moment early on and I was like, this doesn't feel like success.
Interesting.
And it wasn't even about the money or the orders or the size of the company. It was about the feeling.
Right.
And the feeling that I feel now, and I'm glad we're talking at this time of the business, even though I learned a lot during the harder times, the harder parts of harder years, but it feels a lot now like how it did in the beginning. Like when I was really just excited about the prospects of where this was going to go. And I just saw this like huge opportunity for the future of what was going to come. And then there were like 5 years in between where I was like, this is so hard. So many things just kept getting thrown at me. And it just felt like relentless. And then now I would say in the last year, I've put in so much work to just get the people to a really good place. And I didn't realize how much that impacts the mindset and the company. And now I'm at the place again where I'm like, I'm so excited.
Okay.
And so that's it. Yeah. It's definitely like the mindset and the feeling that I get when I come home from work. And like, that's the success right there.
Did you ever think about quitting in those tough years?
No, I never thought about quitting. There were definitely really hard moments. And I would say things like, I don't think I can do this. Or I would make comments like that, but I never genuinely like had a plan for what an alternative life would look like outside of this business. So I would make comments like that for sure, but I never thought like, oh, I wonder what it would be like if I went to go work for someone else. Or like, I never got that far. I think I'm extremely resilient. And so I go through the challenge, but then I come out on the other side and I'm like, oh my God, I've grown so much. Like I can't leave this thing now. Now I have like all these additional tools. Like I have to keep using them and keep growing and keep growing. And I am such a boundary pusher, like for myself, like anytime something is feeling a little bit comfortable, I add something else. I think that's why I'm like having 3 kids and running a business and doing all these things
now.
I know, because the moment things feel a little bit calm, I'm like, I got to throw something else in. But I think that's also why the business has grown, is because I get bored really easily. It's just my nature. Like I can't do the same thing over and over and over. And with the business, it's allowed me to test all different things. Like, right, we started with pillows and cushions. Then we got into upholstery. Then I'm like, let's keep growing spaces. Then let's start doing collaborations. Let's do our own product line. Like we haven't done any of those things yet, but it's on the horizon. And so I can almost start these like mini businesses within this business as a foundation. And I have the tools now to be able to do that. So I work on something for like a year and then it gets to a good place. I hand it off to a team member or hire. And then I like keep pushing the boundary. And I just like, my ceiling just keeps going up and up. So I think that's the way that it'll continue to go, because people who don't understand the ins and outs of the business could from the outside just see this as, oh, you've just been working at an upholstery shop for this many years. Like, aren't you getting bored? And I'm like, no, because I keep changing my own job, because I keep adding and I keep adding and I keep doing different things. And there's so much more that I want to do. But yeah, that's I think where we are.
All right. So one of the questions I've just started asking recently is, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
I don't know, because 5 years ago, I could never have envisioned where I am now. But I think if we're on this path, I think it's refining the business, like what it is now, continuing to adapt to technology and use that to grow. And I want to leave it really open, because I like just seeing where we are and using that to navigate where we're about to go. But I would say AI is going to have a huge impact on what we're doing. And I'm already using it a lot.
Okay.
But my co-founder, so Tom and I have been talking about like what sort of AI tools can we build to help our internal operations, but also help designers. And we have so many ideas that we've started like tinkering around with. This is again, one of my little like side projects within the business that no one really hears about. But I think technology will help shape what this is looking like. I think we'll always be a manufacturer. There will always be some sort of technology aspect. I think there's so much room for growth within the technology side, so much faster than we're able to with manufacturing. But I think it's just continuing to grow that base, continuing to have human connection and to build community. Because even in my generation, like the community building aspect isn't there a lot.
Right. It's
and that's a hard thing.
But it's still not, a lot of us work alone.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. A lot of us work alone in this industry. I think the coolest thing is I've been able to learn so much from other upholsterers that have had businesses longer than I've been alive. And that's who I rely on to like learn information from.
Right.
And I've built such amazing relationships with a lot of these people. And I think this industry is so special because when I was in fashion, it didn't have the same energy of collaboration.
Right.
And everyone really genuinely that I've met in this industry wants to help each other. And like, that's genuinely how I feel too. Like I want to pass that down. I want to collaborate. I have so many other competitor shops that are around me that I've built relationships with that I just call up and I'm like, hey, can you help me solve this thing? Like I've never experienced this before.
Right.
I don't know how to fix it. And they're like the first people to call me back and take time out of their day to just say, okay, try this thing. I actually experienced this before. Test this out. And they're like the best.
Yeah.
It's the best.
Yeah. And it's
more of that.
Fascinating because I love technology. There's so much about where my business has gone that I couldn't do if not for the technology. But the fabrication part of what we do is totally hands-on. This is a business built on our hands and our skills. And so I'm always fascinated by that kind of dichotomy of the technology as well as the basic skills. Most of what you and I do in our workrooms can be done with our hands and needle and thread or some nails or some staples or whatever. But it really is a hands-on thing, but technology can enhance how well we do it. And I'm fascinated by the fact that you've done such specific studies, like how long, how much of each day am I spending on emails? How much hand holding am I doing? Because I think that's probably what's been the biggest game changer for you in your business, where a lot of us will bitch and moan about how long it takes, but not do anything about it, or have the information and the data to back it up and say, oh, this really is a problem. I really can't continue to do this and be successful. Okay.
Right. Because a lot of us look at it's a feeling based off of a problem. Like if you feel like you've experienced this problem a lot, but you don't have the data to back it up, it's sometimes harder to make that decision.
Yes.
Whereas we let the data drive the decision making. And sometimes we choose to not change the scenario. Like, for example, pricing, right? If we realize we're losing money in this one area, but we know that we just can't raise the pricing on that because no one's going to buy it at that price. And we're going to have to make up margins somewhere else for different products. Like we also use that human intuition and the market and just people to make decisions. So sometimes we don't purely make decisions based off of data because then you're not thinking about the human first. Like it just doesn't make sense to have data driving every decision that you're making, but it can inform what sorts of decisions should be made.
Okay.
And at least think about it. But I think the next step too is what you were saying. Yes, everything is so hands-on, right? Like we can have all of our tools. We don't really need a lot of machinery to do what we do.
Right.
But my next, challenge that I'm looking into is like, how do I actually integrate technological machinery into the workflow?
Right.
With like CNC cutting machines and robotics and all of those things. And I've started dabbling in it and testing it. Also, again, to protect my people, like if they're lifting tons of wood all the time, there's injuries that can happen. There's fatigue. People aren't as productive in the afternoon because they've been carrying all this heavy stuff in the morning. And so it's like, how do I invest in tools and machinery that are going to help them at the end of the day and the business? So it's people first, but also efficiency at the same time. And then if I can become more efficient and I don't have to hire as many people, which also it's very hard to hire, as we all know in this industry, then I can pay them more. Like I can make the thing faster without them having to actually go faster.
Okay.
And we can charge the same price and there's more money and then I can pay them more and I can give them more. And I think that's the ultimate goal is like to continue to refine that with technology. So technology can drive all of those things, but the value system is so strong within me that I've had just since I've been growing up. Like my parents were such great role models for this. My dad was also an entrepreneur, had like a ton of businesses. And so I saw that in him, but his value system was always like people first. People are the most important thing. You have to do the right thing. Treat others with respect, treat others the way you want to be treated. Like that was instilled in me from the day I was born. And so like those values still hold true. And whenever I'm making a decision, it's very easy to make decisions and I make them really quick because I think about what matters the most and it's the people.
Okay.
Whether it's the client or my employees.
Right.
So that's allowed me to, not have to overthink decision making because I know what really matters in the world.
Okay. So I'm curious, so many of the people I've started this podcast 8 years ago. The technology has changed dramatically. And there are some people that I say, what's your favorite technology in your business? And they like, I don't really use much. People have come back over and over and said their phone. Their phone they couldn't run their business without it. I am especially anxious to hear your answer. What is your favorite technology that you're using in your business?
So I definitely have the basics, which is like my computer, my phone. But within that, it's the project management software that we use called ClickUp, which again, there's so many different versions of what this is. And I think what I love about it is just the automation where nothing has to live in my brain anymore and it just tells me what to do.
Yeah.
And then I think like artificial intelligence, like ChatGPT, it's just game changing. The amount of time that I have saved because of this is incredible.
So I'm working with someone to learn AI a little bit better. And I'm actually, our circle time in the library next month is going to be on AI. I've been playing around with it. And the other day, someone sent me their biography for the podcast, and it was written in the first person. And I've had to change that every single time. And for some reason, I was like, oh, I wonder if ChatGPT would do it. Seconds. It took seconds for it to be done. I was like, that would have taken me 20 minutes to do. And it was that little light bulb that went, I still had to read it. I had to make sure it was okay, but it really took seconds. And I thought, I've really got to start thinking about other ways for me. And I have. I've used it in a couple different ways. It just fascinates me what we are able to do with it.
And I know. And it can be scary.
Yes.
I know that like the conversation around it and everything it's a little uneasy, but if you can use it in a positive way, and the way that I like to look at it is the most important job for me is taking care of people. That's the number one thing. And if I can spend a little less time like writing an email or looking into a number or analyzing data just manually, and this can save me an hour a day, then I can spend 1 extra hour a day helping to mentor my managers or checking in on people, taking someone to lunch, building the human connection. This is what is the most important, right? And so that's what drives me to use it even more, is because if I can maximize the human aspects of this job, which are the most important, and the things that don't really matter, like edit my email to make sure that I'm not using like incorrect grammar, right? It saves me 10 minutes. But if I do that 10 times, that's an incredible amount of time. And then I open myself up to really genuinely be able to have the patience and the time to sit down to like have conversations with my team.
Yeah. And I also think about if it maximizes what you're doing at work, and even though when you go home from work, you're tired, you're not exhausted and you're not burned out. And so that time with your family is still good quality time. And you can be present and not thinking, oh, I never got those 3 emails out at the end of the day. We're entrepreneurs. There's always going to be something we didn't get done. However, if it helps, and like I said, I just kept sitting there looking, I'm like, I can't believe that's how easy it was. What took me so long to do that?
I know. It's incredible.
What, besides the technology, I'm thinking more workroom, what business items could you not live without? We talked about your phone and the computer, but when you're in your workroom right now, what are the things you could not live without?
I think our organizational systems that we've created.
Okay.
And it's not necessarily like hard technology that you think of, but just the systems that we've adopted. For example, like the fabric wall that we've created. One inefficiency that I noticed was how long it took someone to find the fabric for the order, just because now it's so large. And so we put our heads together and we're like, okay, how do we go from taking 30 seconds to find a fabric to 5 seconds to find a fabric? And then that scaled out over time. Like, how much time can we save for something like that? And so we had this idea. We're like, okay, we'll build this cubby system. We'll have like A, B, C, D, E, F, G going this direction, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 going down. And then in our back end, like when you're looking for the fabric, it'll tell you exactly which cubby it's in.
Okay.
And over time, we can continue to develop that. Like if we could get robotics involved, it'll just know. It's like a vending machine, it just goes to the exact spot that it needs to. And so you're saving time that way. So like using our team to come up with tools that allow us to be more efficient so that they can focus on not having to find the fabric, to actually just cut the fabric. Things like that. And then I would say my favorite, this is like something that we built ourselves internally, but my favorite technology tool aspect of our website that we built is the fabric reminder system.
Okay.
Which was, this happens all the time that I experienced before we built this website, where the fabric, there's 3 fabrics in an order, for example. The designer sends all 3 of them, or at least they think they did. And they call me a couple of weeks later saying, hey, like, how's my project going? I'm like, we haven't even received the 2 other fabrics yet. Like, we're waiting for them. So I was spending so much time updating people saying, like, 1 of your 3 fabrics has arrived. We can't start until we get these other 2. And so once we built something in our platform that allowed that to automatically happen, it sends automatic reminder emails every week saying, like, we're still missing 2 fabrics. These are what they are. This is what the vendor is. And the amount of responses that we've gotten from designers being like, oh, I called the vendor. I didn't realize it was back ordered. Or, oh, thank you for reminding me. I completely forgot to order it. There's such a short window now for that loss of opportunity for them to become upset.
Yes.
Because it doesn't, like, there could be months that go by where we have fabric sitting there, but we just don't have the rest of it yet.
Right.
But they're constantly getting those reminders to be like, here you go. And that was taking up so much of my time because I was having to be extremely organized. I had spreadsheets. I was like double checking things, and there was still a lot of human error. Whereas this system now, just, I don't do anything. Okay. I literally do nothing. It just automatically does all of those things. So I think any tool that I love is related to efficiency. Okay. Because it again gives me the time to be able to spend on what I need to. But yeah, I know. I wish I had a better answer. Like, this is the one thing that solves everything. But
no, I'm always fascinated by what people get most excited about in their workrooms. So do you get to do any creating in the business anymore that is not, that is, you're creating the business? Do you do anything hands-on now?
Not for the business, but I do personal things.
Okay, good.
And it's a little rushed, definitely, because now I'm working a lot, but then also I want to be with the kids when I'm home, because I know like that time in my life is also so fleeting. So I try to find balance. Also, I don't think I mentioned this, but we're on a 4-day work week.
I knew that from your webinar, but I'm so glad you brought it up. I think it's fabulous. Please tell us more about that.
Okay. So we're trying to like stay cutting edge. We're trying to stay with the times. We're trying to make people work less, but like produce the same amount. And in October of last year, in 2023, we had this idea. We got buy-in from the entire team of what that would look like. And we did a 3-month trial just to see if how that would affect the business. Like, were our sales going to go down, or was our productivity going to go down? And we had all these KPIs tracking like what indicators were going to show if this was a positive or a negative. And it turned out that after those 3 months, like, sales were still good and our productivity was actually higher, and we became more efficient, and we did all of these things. So then we permanently instilled that. So since January, we've had a 4-day work week, which is Monday through Thursday. They're 10-hour days. I think over time, we're going to try to cut back. So we're doing less time in general. And with more and more technology, we'll be able to do that in the coming years. But the reason that I'm saying that is because now that we have Fridays off, I still have childcare on Fridays, but I usually take Friday to do something for myself. Nice. So like this past Friday, I went into the workroom and I made something for like the baby that I'm going to have in December. And so I get to like have those like hands-on creative experiences still. It's not as much as I used to, but I still get, I get to scratch the itch.
Okay. I love to hear that. It's why I started asking the question, because so many of us went so far beyond why we started the business.
I know.
What do you do extremely well?
What do I do extremely well? I think I relate to people really well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I built a lot of trust with people. And I think people know that I'm just one of them. Okay. Like I'm not an outsider, and we can all work together. And I've really been good after kind of navigating the people stuff that was more of a challenge in the beginning, just being like a coach and a leader. It's hard because I was so young when I started this that it was hard to hire people who had a lot of experience because they didn't trust me.
Right.
Because they were like, who's this young girl coming in trying to like do this thing? Yeah. You know, they're like looking at me through that lens, which I completely understand. And I think once you get to know me, you realize like, I have your best interest. I'm really just trying to keep up with the times and do something innovative and fun. And I know together that we can solve this. And I also put so much value and respect into people that have more experience than me in other ways. And I think I've done a really good job at hiring because I hire people that are smarter than me and better in quality than I am. And, you know, one of the questions, Seal, we were talking about earlier was quality control and like making mistakes and all of that. And it's great because all the people that I've hired are much better sellers than I ever was. So no matter what, they're going to produce product that was better. And if I've already built a client based off of what my quality level was, it's just improving.
Right.
So I think it's instilling, I've instilled a lot of confidence, I think, in others too, because once they start to see that, oh, like this girl could do this, like she's this young girl who like doesn't have a lot of experience in this industry, but I think I've built a solid team and I'm generally like a really positive person. And I think bringing that to the table has been really, really good.
Okay. What do you not do so well?
I don't know how to handle like the mental load of it all very well.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that it feels the same as it did day one. Whether I had 1 employee or 20 employees, I don't like letting people down.
Okay.
And so I think that has been really hard to overcome, and it can feel all consuming. And it's a really good driver because it helps me make good decisions, but it also can be so hard to manage.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to let anyone down, but I know I'm going to. Like, I can't satisfy everyone. I can't make everyone happy. And if I try to, that I'm going to fail. I just know that. And then I start, you know, if I don't create like a fair system for everyone and have to say no to people, that's hard. And it's just, I think dealing with that mental load has been my biggest challenge.
Okay.
Which I'm getting better at for sure. It's just taking time.
Yeah. What do you like best about this business?
I would say the people.
Okay.
Like everyone's coming from different backgrounds. I have so many people from different countries that work for me, from different cultures, from different first languages, to all of those things, to just like different walks of life. But I think the coolest part is that at the end of the day, all of that is stripped away because we're all trying to produce something and we all have a common goal. And it's just really cool to see that we can all come together to do that.
Okay. What do you like least about it?
The stress of like the money and having to make sure that I'm making payroll every 2 weeks. I like looking at the numbers, and I think there's like a lot of creativity in that, and I find joy in it. But it's the bank account that's the most stressful.
Okay. What about you would surprise people?
I've had 2 home births. And I'm about to have a 3rd.
Wow. You are brave.
And I'm kind of obsessed with like the birth community.
Okay.
It's like my side, other like worlds that I dabble in, that I have community around. I'm also an indoor cycling instructor.
Are you? I'm exhausted just listening.
It's like part of that is like my therapy.
Yeah.
It's like that's where I go and I get to work out and I get to empower other people. And so people, it's funny because when I'm in cycling, no one knows that I have this business. They they think my main job is a cycling instructor, which I've led them to believe.
Okay.
But then it's like kind of vice versa. Like I have this upholstery shop and no one knows that I have this like secret passion for cycling.
For the cycling. Okay. Are you still able to do that right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll probably teach until I'm like 35 weeks. Or
okay.
Something.
That's amazing.
Some time.
Yeah. You mentioned being resilient, Ella. In what ways do you think you're resilient?
I think that every challenge has just made me stronger. And I know that going into it. And I just know that I'm going to make it. And I think the resiliency has grown because I've realized every time some big challenge happens and I've overcome it, it's always happened. Like I've always been able to make it work somehow. Yes. And the more and more that happens, the more confidence you have in the resiliency of yourself.
Yes.
And so I hope that continues. But yeah, like I get over things really fast.
Okay.
Like it can be really intense in a moment, but then the next day I'm on to the next thing.
Okay. All right. So before I ask the last question, how can people find you and your business? I know you're on Instagram, and is it The Stitch Room or just Stitch Room?
It's Try Stitch Room.
Okay.
We've been trying to get the actual just Stitch Room for so long.
Okay.
So.
All right.
Try Stitch Room.
I'll put links to it. And are you on Facebook as well?
Yes. Okay. And I think it's the same. If you like search Stitch Room or facebook.com/Stitch Room, it'll come up.
Okay.
Or Try Stitch Room.
Links in the show notes for people.
Okay.
So this has been a delight, and I could talk to you all afternoon, but you've got a business to run and 2 little children at home. So I would love to hear what advice you have for people who are just coming into the business or for people who have been around for a while.
I think for people who are just coming into the business, have the proof of concept first. Like, don't worry about all the business side of things and if you're doing everything the right way. It's just find the people who want your product, make it really well, and then prove out that you can find more of those people.
Okay.
And then once you do that, then start to do all the documents and the corporation and all that stuff. Because I feel like a lot of people think they need to be completely set up before they actually start the business, but that's not true. You can go for like 6 months and just start to test this stuff, just track everything. Mm-hmm. And then once you realize, okay, we're legit, we're good, we got 1 or 2 clients, that's all we need. Mm-hmm. Then start to think about all those other things.
Okay.
And then I think for people who have been in this for a long time, just try to stay invigorated, try to keep pushing yourself to stay excited. Cause I also have met a lot of jaded people in this industry who are it's so hard, all of that. And so if you do have a team, I would say also trust your team and don't micromanage and empower others to push themselves, because that is what's going to allow your business to grow.
All right. I think that's great advice. And I have so thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much, Ella. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you too. It was so fun.
Once again, I'm incredibly fascinated by our different perspectives and how we run our businesses. Ella's focus on productivity and speed and using technology to help her is really fascinating to me. And I just can't wait to see where she goes with this business and what she's willing to try next. Her enthusiasm and her excitement about what she's doing is so refreshing. And I hope that, as she said at the end, if you've been around for a while, look for what still makes you feel passionate about this industry. Seeing people excited and positive about what they're doing is really a wonderful thing to see. I really hope you enjoyed this interview with Ella. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a great day.